Okay, good evening. I would like to call the Committee of the Whole meeting of February 27, 2023 to order on this snowy evening. Good evening, everyone. My name is J.D. Patriva, Councillor and Chair of Planning and Economic Development Committee. I would like to begin by reading a safety notice. In the event of an emergency, please evacuate council chambers to the nearest exit through the chamber doors and obey all instructions given. And if assistance is required, please see the Deputy Clerk. Devan, can you point yourself out? Okay, so we'll be playing Follow the Leader with Devan. Once you have evacuated the building, please gather in the front parking lot outside of Town Hall. Also, please ensure you place your cell phones on silent or turn them off. And lastly, the Town of Lincoln Council meetings are posted on our YouTube channel. All members of council are in attendance with regrets we've received from Councillor Brunet, Mayor Easton, and Councillor Timmers, both because of the weather. We also have senior staff in attendance tonight. Additionally, we have representatives from Urban in Mind, IBI Group, and Lifetime Developments, and resident delegations attending tonight's meeting. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Reimer.
Thank you, Chair Patriva. I'll be declaring interest in on the agenda item 7.1.1 and 7.2.1. The applicant is a customer of the company that I work for.
Okay, terrific.
Thank you.
Councillor Mikluck.
Thank you, Chair Patriva. I'll be declaring a indirect conflict of interest with item 5.1 as I own investment property within that catchment area, that 120-meter catchment area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Do members of the committee have any amendments to the order of tonight's agenda? Okay, I see none. So we're going to start. We have two statutory public meetings tonight. The purpose of each public meeting is to receive comments from the public and consider questions regarding zoning bylaw amendment application by 20 Valley Communities Incorporated for 3731 19th Street and 3446 Rittenhouse Road. We will consider the staff report associated with the item immediately after the statutory public meeting. Sections 5120 and 3412 of the Planning Act requires that before passing a zoning bylaw amendment, council must ensure that sufficient information and material is available to fully understand, generally, the proposal being considered, and council must hold at least one public meeting for the purpose of giving the public an opportunity to make representations regarding the proposed amendments. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at such public meetings or make written submissions to the Town of Lincoln before the zoning amendment is approved or a decision is made on the draft plan of subdivision, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of Town Council to the Ontario Land Tribunal, OLT. Personal information is collected under the authority of the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act and may be contained in an appendix to a staff report. Published in the meeting agenda, delegation list and or the minutes of the public meeting are made part of the public record. The Town of Lincoln collects this information in order to make informed decisions on the relevant issues and to notify interested parties of council's decisions. Names and addresses contained in submitted correspondence and other information will be available to the public unless the individual expressly requests the town to remove that personal information. The disclosure of this information is governed by the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Our first public meeting tonight is for the purpose of the zoning bylaw amendment by 20 Valley Communities, Inc. for 3731 19th Street, PD 08-23. I will ask our Manager of Planning and Development to provide introductory comments this evening. Monica, please go ahead.
Thank you, and good evening, Chair, members of the committee, council, staff, and the public. This zoning bylaw amendment application before you today in the name of 20 Valley Communities, Inc. is to permit the construction of a two-story semi-detached dwelling, including 2 secondary residential units with site-specific zoning provisions. The subject lands are located on the east side of 19th Street, south of King Street in Jordan, and are municipally known as 3731 19th Street. An existing apartment dwelling is located on the south side of the subject lands, and the proposed semi-detached dwelling is proposed to be located on the vacant portion of the lands on the northwest side of the property, with parking to the rear. It is important to note that the front yard setback of the proposed semi-detached dwelling is keeping in line with the setbacks of the buildings on either side. As well, the proposed 1.2-meter northerly side yard setback is typical with these types of lower-density residential units. The required 6-meter setback is due to the current RM2 zoning, a residential multiple 2 zoning, permitting higher-density residential uses such as apartment dwellings. An open house was held on February 16th and was well attended. No decision will be made this evening, but rather feedback from the open house and from today's public meeting will be received, and staff will address these comments in a subsequent recommendation report at a later date. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monica. There are 3 registered delegations for this item tonight. Please note delegations may speak for a maximum of 5 minutes. Once we have received the delegations, committee will transition directly into the report and motion. Our first delegation for this item is Terrence Glover of Urban In Mind Consultants. Terrence, please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of council. So I won't go through the background because I'm limited to 5 minutes, and you have the staff report in front of you to show why we are in policy context and should be permitted to develop this. If you could skip to the next slide. I'll just give you an advance warning. Victoria, who is going to present with us, unfortunately, she may have COVID, so I'm doing it in her place. It does.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
You're too tall for a mic.
Here, I'll speak into the microphone. Is that better? If we can go to the next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry. Perfect. Just the overview. I don't know if I'll get to all these within 5 minutes, but to the right is a concept of what the building is intended to look like. Again, we're still going back and forth with town staff as to the ultimate image and elevation of this, but this is the context of what we're intending. This is the property. You can see on the northern portion of the property on 19th Street that there's vacant underutilized land. Regardless of this application, we'll be moving ahead with a revised parking lot design. We don't need any permissions other than a site alteration to redo the parking lot. And if you've driven by this site, you can tell that the parking lot currently is not as efficient as it should be or as aesthetic as it should be. So we're looking to move ahead with that regardless to improve the site. In addition, we've received a minor variance approval for an addition at the front of the building. The intent was to do an apartment building and a group home on that front portion of the addition. Unfortunately, the members that were moving ahead with the group home community living are no longer interested, and we have then moved ahead with an apartment complex. So 3 units instead of 1 unit plus a group home. Will now be 3 new apartment units on the front of this addition. And again, that addition was approved through minor variance. It was appealed to the OLT. That appeal was dismissed through new legislation that came through. This is essentially what it looks like in the summertime, not this today. It's not the most aesthetic site. It needs a lot of improvement, especially at the corner of King Street where we have a tourist center and we have improvements from the region coming forward. The current designation in the official plan is mixed use, and the current zoning is RM2. The interesting thing with RM2 is it allows higher density development, but it does not currently allow semi-attached units. So we are proposing before you tonight to go and have a permission for semi-attached units here. Just to keep in mind, we currently can go ahead with another apartment building. Mind you, we have parking, we have setbacks and things we have to go, but the physical form or the typology we can move ahead with is a 3-story apartment building to typically mirror what we have now. we decided that may not be the best development type for the town. We understand we have a single-story townhouses to one side, we have an apartment building on the other side, we have another single detached, and across the street, we have a two-story commercial unit. So within that development concept and the street frontage, we thought the semi-attached units would be the typology that would transition correctly from a townhouse, single-story, to a two-story semi to an apartment building. I mean, other than a single-story townhouse to another apartment, didn't make sense to us. And we can get the same unit count out of the semis, which would be 4, two primary and 2 second or accessory units. The town has asked us to provide 4 or more because of the density increase that they want. So we'd be able to provide 4 here. If we're not able to move ahead with the semis, we'll likely come back for an apartment building of some form because we want to maximize the site and provide the infill development, which is asked for and required. But we want to do it in a sensitive nature, and that's why we feel that the semi-attached makes sense to us and hopefully everybody around. There are some concerns that were raised at the open house, and we've taken note of those concerns. Some of them are the setback of the building, the interior side yard setback from the current side yard lot line to the proposed rear yard of the building. 1.2 meters is what we're proposing. And then we have the driveway, which unfortunately we can't change the width of that driveway, which is 6 meters for fire code and emergency access. Because of that issue, we're looking to slide that building down south to move it away from the interior side lot line. We're not sure how that's going to work out yet. We're still in discussions with town staff about if that's possible and how that will change the site. But we're looking to do that right now. In addition, we're currently developing a shadow study. We want to see how our building would impact the neighbors. Now, mind you, there's currently a 6-foot fence, privacy fence along that. But we're still looking to see what the impacts would be of our building. And maybe we have to move our building itself. Maybe we have to change the roof line of the house. So we understand that there's a concern about shadowing, and we are going to redress that. Transportation-wise, we wanted driveways on the front of these units. The region said it's too close to the King Street intersection. There's no way that you can have driveways onto this. So therefore, we have to utilize the existing driveway for the apartment building. We would have preferred to have driveways up the front like a typical semi, but unfortunately we couldn't because of the region. We felt the character of these buildings represented an improved look for the roadways in these areas, especially with the new improvements that the region will be doing here. There's municipal parking down the street. It's a great infill development, I think. Now, as we are forced to deal with growth throughout Canada, the province, and the region, both federal, not both, but federal, provincial, regional, local have all said we have to have growth. How do we do that so it works? And unfortunately, with that policy, which is currently there, sometimes we have to make some hard decisions and hard choices that will benefit the whole of society, not just everybody, people who live here, people who live around here. We do have to be sensitive to them, but we also have to think of what's the greater need here and what are the policies telling us we have to do. In that regard, we've tried to create a product that fits within the development context of the area, is sensitive to the abutting land uses, and again, it's not perfected yet. We're still going back and forth with staff to come up with a product that works, both from a policy as well as a sensitivity point of view, but we're nearly there. And again, that's what it generally will look like. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Glover. Any questions from committee? Okay. And remember, committee, it's questions of clarification. It's not a cross-examination. That comes when we get to the report. Okay, so Councillor Murray, lead us on. Oh, okay.
Not that it was a cross-examination, it was just a different kind of question.
Okay. So, Councillor Reimer.
Councilor Regina, you have to come out of the queue.
And then you can come back in. Okay, Councillor Reimer.
Thank you, Chair Patriva. To the presenter, thank you for coming this evening. Just a question regarding parking spaces, and on the drawing, it looks like there is I don't know if we can have that our site plan, again, our concept site plan up there, at the very north corner, is there another access to that northern, to the north semi-detached? Or is that an existing, is that a, looks like there's an access there. It's not shown as a parking lot, but, or parking spot, but is that proposed to be that or not?
You can use the proposed. Tell me when to stop.
Go back.
Sure.
Yeah, right there.
That one, yep.
If you could just identify to me, is this,
Well, show this.
sorry, if you can identify to me which space, is it, I think it's the hammerhead you're talking about in the middle, is that correct?
No, it's the very north corner of the lot, northwest corner of this particular, right where it narrows down to the north of the semi-detached, proposed semi-detached building. It shows an access off 19th Street. Is that actual? Is that going to be a park? You got it right there. Is that going to be a,
No,
that will not be?
That's, the region says we cannot have any access there at all. That's not an access, no.
So the parking spaces that are shown are the ones that were. are on there,
In the rear
on
yard only,
proposal.
yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry
Thank you,
about
Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rinchema.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation. I'm wondering, will site plan be part of the process?
So site plans, under the new legislation, site plans required for 10 or more units. In this case, if we include the semis, site plan will be required. If the semis are not included under the current development, which is currently approved, the 6 units plus the 3 does not require site plan because that's 9 units. But once we introduce the semis on the overall property, it's more than 10, so site plan will be required.
Okay, so my question further to that is you were talking about a shadow study. So will that be taken care of as part of the OPA and ZBA, or will that be during the site plan process?
So we're working on that now, and we're working with staff to make sure that we have addressed that issue. Technically, it would be required as part of the site plan, but we are addressing it now as part of the OPA and zoning, the zoning amendment, so that we can come forward with a good application and not have to deal or argue that point after the fact. We want to resolve it now before we move forward with the project. If it means, as a good neighborhood, if it means we have to change our roof line, if it means we're moving the building back a bit to get more sunlight into the neighbor's yard, we should do that now before we move too far ahead. So we don't want to wait till site plan, even though site plan will be required. We want to resolve it now.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Glover. Okay, our next delegation is Joe Sproviero. Joe, come on up.
Great, thanks very much. Can you hear me okay? Councilors, staff representatives, all others, good evening. My name is Joe Sproviero, and I live at 28-2880 King Street in Jordan, adjacent to the subject property at 3731 19th Street. Thank you for allowing me to speak for a few minutes to share my thoughts about this application for a zoning bylaw amendment to that property. First, I'd like to acknowledge that we understand the property owner has the right to build on the property. However, it should be within the zoning bylaws permitted by the town of Lincoln. Our hope is that where we end up at the end of this process, what the town will allow to build will enhance the property and the surrounding community. The applicant is seeking several amendments to the existing zoning bylaw. Sorry, I'm reading, so bear with me. The existing bylaw in order to achieve his desires, and in my opinion, it's the town's responsibility, as I'm sure they would agree, to ensure that the end product will have considered and respected the thoughts and residents of the surrounding community. Again, we understand that the applicant has a right to build on this property. I think that some of the requests exceed what would be considered reasonable. For example, asking for a total parking allowance of 13 spaces where 19 spaces are required per the current zoning bylaw, if I understand it correctly, and I'm sure there are others that can expand on that. a total landscape open space request of 26.7% of the lot area, where 30% is a minimum required. Front and interior side yard setbacks of 3 meters and 1.2 meters respectively, where currently 6 meters are required. There is also a right to light concern for the owner of unit number 30, whose back fence will be 1.2 meters away from the proposed two-story structure on the subject lands. Terrence touched on that, and we spoke at the open house, and, you know, to his credit, he did say that he would look at it, and it sounds like they're going to do that, so that's nice to hear. So the threat to the sunlight, you know, for unit number 30, who's enjoyed clear sunlight throughout the afternoon hours for, I don't know, 12 or 15 years now since the community was built, is threatened because the two-story structure being 1.2 meters off her property line at a height of 25 to 30 feet, as the afternoon sun comes around, it's going to impact the enjoyment of her backyard and sunlight into her into the back of her home. The town has already allowed the applicant some minor variances on the property that are more than minor in our opinion. But if you cast your thoughts back to last June when the applicant asked for and was granted variance request to make an addition to the existing apartment building on the property, the minor variance was made to allow for a group home and an additional market rental property. The group home, per Terrence and our meeting the other day, the group home design has been abandoned in favor of 3 market rental apartments. The original 6-unit apartment building that exists today somehow went from 6 units to 7 units in the intervening time since last June till today. I believe Terrence or maybe Mr. Neeson can confirm that there are currently 7 units, not 6, in that apartment building. So what we're doing here as a delegation, and I'm speaking for myself, but I've had plenty of input from my neighbors, we ask that the town do its due diligence when considering what it will allow. The requested parameters appear to keep shifting, and you know we're concerned that how will the town vote on parameters that seem to be changing with each month or application that comes through. So I think, you know, we hope that the matters and the outcome will be agreeable to all concerned. And we're hoping that, you know, the applicant and the town will come to an agreement that enhances the entire community. Our development has been there now for about 15 years. The apartment building that has been in existence before we got there has not been an issue. You know, neighbors have been friendly. We've come to know some of the people that live in those apartments over the years. It's changed slightly since the purchase of that unit or of that apartment building about 1.5 years ago. So we just ask that the town, understanding that you're under pressure from, you know, the province and the region for infill housing, for, you know, for properties that will, you know, get more people into the town. Nobody's against that. We all agree that, yes, that's fine. That's a very good objective. We just want it done in a way that respects the existing community and the people that have been there for 15+ years now. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Joe. Any questions to Mr. Sproviero? No, I don't see any. Thank you very much, Joe.
Thank you.
Our next delegation is Kara Clark. Kara or Kara?
Either one is okay.
Okay. Welcome.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Council, for the opportunity to speak to you tonight about this application. I reside at Unit Number 2, 2880 King Street, which of course is the townhouse complex immediately adjacent to the subject property. And I was actually the one who filed the appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal of the original approval for the first round of zoning bylaw variances that this developer requested. So unfortunately, based on new legislation, I didn't have the opportunity to make my case to the Ontario Land Tribunal. So what I want to talk about tonight is some concerns that some residents in our townhouse complex have about the proposal that's before you. The first concern is parking. So you'll notice that obviously fewer parking spaces are being requested than are required by the zoning bylaw. This leaves no room for any visitor parking for any of the residents who may reside in this new addition and the new semi-detached houses that are being proposed, which could be an issue for residents in our neighborhood. The local businesses have recently put up signs prohibiting parking in their parking lots. There isn't a lot of parking available other than on the street for any visitors that may want to visit their friends and family who live in the existing apartment and in the new proposed addition and the semi. I also would like to point out that the proposal that you have in front of you isn't correct. As Joe mentioned, there are 7 units currently in the existing apartment building. If you're interested, I have photos and video of the 7th unit that was added by the developer after he purchased the property without building permits to do so. So what the developer appears to be asking for is less parking spots than indicated on this plan. Instead of 1 spot per unit, it's now less than 1 spot per unit. That's obviously a concern for us for a couple of reasons. The developer has indicated a willingness to subdivide some of those existing apartment units without building permits or planning permission. So if the developer moves forward to subdivide any further units, the amount of parking spaces that are available to residents on that property will further decrease. And if you refer to the site plan, it appears as though there isn't room to add any more parking spaces. So that could be a future concern. What I would like to request is that if council does move forward with approving this application, the council seek an undertaking from the developer that he will not further subdivide any of the units that exist on the property or any of the units that he is intending to build, so that the already reduced available parking spots are not further reduced by any additional subdivisions. The units that are in the existing apartment building are 2-bedroom units, so it is entirely possible that they could be subdivided into bachelors and 1-bedrooms. That's something I think would have a negative impact, certainly on parking in our area and on the ability of those residents to have their friends and family come and visit them. There would be nowhere for those individuals to park. I also would like to remind the developer that although we appreciate he can build on this property, in order to build the apartment complex that he suggested he could build, or that his planner suggested he could build, he would again need a zoning variance because he doesn't have sufficient land for the amount of parking spots that would be required to build a second apartment complex on this property. Parking is a major issue for residents, and I think you can appreciate if you live in neighborhoods where parking is at a premium and people are parking on streets or parking in parking lots of businesses where they're not supposed to park, that can become an issue for residents. I also want to ensure that a landscape plan is presented. When the Committee of Adjustment approved the original zoning variance, it was on the condition that a landscape plan would be presented to residents in our complex for our consultation to ensure that the impact of these zoning variances on our community is minimized. And I certainly hope that the council will move forward with ensuring that landscape plan is communicated to us. Thank you again for the opportunity to talk tonight. I really appreciate your time and attention.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. Any questions from committee? Okay, thank you. There being no further registered delegates, are there any persons wishing to address council regarding the zoning bylaw amendment by 20 Valley Communities Incorporated for 3731 19th Street? Oh. Terrence.
Thank you. I'd just like to set the record straight. There are only 6 units in the apartment building. There was originally, when the owner purchased it, there was a thought to have a 7th unit in there. That unit's not there. There's 6 units in that building. There's intended to be 6 units plus the additional 3, which we've got approval for. So there'll be 9 units total in that apartment building. Just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I clarify as well? Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
I respectfully, you allowed Terrence to clarify. I would like the opportunity to clarify that point as well.
well, I did because he's representing the owner of the property, and you had made a point about the number of units, so.
But that, he's being disingenuous with the number of units. The developer at the open house meeting admitted in front of Monica that there are currently 7 units in that apartment complex.
Okay, well, we'll go to staff and we'll, yes. Monica?
Thank you. Through you, Chair, I did check with our CBO. He's been in the building, and he confirmed that there are 6 units. One of the units, there was an additional bedroom and bathroom added to the unit, but there are 6 units.
Okay. Okay. Then, okay, so, let me get to that. So please come forward. Come to the podium, state your name, spelling properly, and for the record, and your address.
Am I on?
You're on.
Hey, my name's Colin Parcher. I live in unit number 2 at 2880 King Street.
How do you spell your surname, Colin?
P-A-R-C-H-E-R.
Okay.
A former resident of the building, Todd Jameson, invited me into the building shortly after it was sold. On the 3rd floor, there was a door punched into the hallway at the top of the stairs. There was a new bathroom put in. There was a kitchen being put in. They had taken one room from the unit to the right and one room from the unit to the left. I have photos of it. So I'm sorry, but there is 3 units on that top floor, and unless all of a sudden they have removed them. There are 7 units in that building, and I spoke to Mr. Jameson about 3 weeks ago, and to his knowledge, there's still three units on that floor. His mother lives on the bottom, and his sister lives on the bottom. He lived up on the top,
Okay.
on the 2nd floor.
Okay, so thank you for that. Leave that with us, and Mr. Bruder and our CBO will go and investigate, so.
Well, I can send Matt pictures.
Okay.
Thank you.
You've got Matt's email?
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Okay, terrific.
Unfortunately for Matt, I have his email.
Okay, okay. So you two have been in contact?
Yeah, not on this issue.
Okay, okay, thank you very much. Anyone else? Okay. So there being no further delegations for this item, I now declare the public meeting to address the zoning bylaw amendment by 20 Valley Communities for 3731 19th Street adjourned. I have a motion moved by Councillor Russell. The council receive and file as information the following delegations regarding zoning bylaw amendment application by 20 Valley Communities for 3731 19th Street, Terrence Glover, Urban in Mind, Joe Sproviero, Kara Clark, and Colin Parcher. I will now ask our deputy clerk to call out the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote's now open. And I'm going to close the vote, and that motion carries. Thank you.
Okay. So we will move directly into report PD 08-23 regarding the zoning bylaw amendment application by 20 Valley Communities for 3731 19th Street. Are there any questions from council? And Ms. Coquiera will field those. Okay. There be no further questions. I have a motion moved by Councillor Murray. The council receive and file for information report PD 08-23 regarding zoning bylaw amendment. Okay, Councillor Murray.
My apologies, JD, I missed.
Quite all right.
procedure.
I'll speak louder.
Yeah, I apologize.
Okay, no worries.
So just a point of process. Can I ask can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
Of the people who did the presentation? It's not really that. Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, excellent. So I wanted to find out a little bit more about the parking, just because I think a number of people did express concerns about it. And the argument is that there will be 13 units in total, 13 spaces. Is that correct?
I'm losing my math here. There'd be 9 plus 4, so 13, yes.
13. So, while there is public parking available down the road, your plan then does imply that there's one vehicle per unit and never a visitor. And if the visitors are there then, or anyone has more than one car, they would be using the public space down the road by the fire hall?
So currently, we're finding that we're not even utilizing one car per unit. So we don't feel we'll have a problem with that with the apartment complex the way it is. The public parking space, that's what it's for in terms of public parking. If you had an Easter celebration or Christmas celebration, you had overflow parking, they would be available to park at the public parking space. If someone has a visitor parking, they're available to walk to the municipal parking space as well. Again, we don't feel that we're going to be utilizing this entire 13 spaces as it is. So there will obviously be spaces left over, in our opinion. But again, worst case scenario that there's not spaces left over, there is a public parking space and street parking in the neighborhood and that, but we would prefer to send them to the public parking space.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Mr. Glover. Okay. So, we have a motion moved by Councillor Murray. Councillor Russell. Okay. I'd request that you guys get on this and get in a more timely fashion. Councillor Russell, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My apologies. It's your definitive pause I was waiting for. Just a question through to staff. I'm looking at the property and the lot lines, and I'm also looking at the property of a lot of the concerned citizens that have come forward tonight. And again, just by my own view, and I'm not sure if Mr. Bruder or Ms. Kuchera could answer this. Just wondering what sort of zoning amendment bylaws we would have made on that property for the residents that are currently in there. So on the King Street property that most of the residents here tonight are. Like, would they? Again, it looks like they are very, very close to the property line already. I'm just trying to get an idea of the context of the property itself and what's being asked compared to what was done prior.
Mr. Bruder.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, there was a zoning bylaw amendment that was undertaken. You're talking about the adjacent lands to the north?
Yes.
Councillor? Yeah, there was a zoning bylaw amendment completed before that development occurred to facilitate it. Some of the specific provisions were relief from lot frontage, minimum lot area, maximum density, minimum front yard, side yard setbacks, and deck encroachments.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bruder. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Councillor Reimer, Councillor Winchima? No? Okay. So, a motion moved by Councillor Murray. The council receive and file for information report PD 08-23 regarding zoning bylaw amendment application by 20 Valley Communities Incorporated, and direct staff to prepare a recommendation report once all comments have been received and any identified issues have been addressed. I will now ask our deputy clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote's now open. And I'm closing the vote. And that motion carries, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Devan. And in that subsequent report, Mr. Bruder and staff will bring to light these questions we've heard tonight and lay them out once and for all. Okay, so thank you very much. Our second public meeting is for the purpose of the zoning bylaw amendment application by 20 Valley Communities, Inc. for 3446 Rittenhouse Road, PD 05-23. I will ask our planner, Allison Martin, to speak to this. Allison, go ahead, please.
Thank you, and through you, good evening, Chair, members of the committee, council, staff, and the public. The lands subject to the application are located on the south side of Rittenhouse Road, to the west of Victoria Avenue, east of Glendale Avenue, and are municipally known as 3446 Rittenhouse Road. The zoning bylaw amendment application before you today, in the name of 20 Valley Communities, Inc., seeks to permit the construction of an addition to the northerly wall of the existing institutional structure and to permit the construction of a semi-detached dwelling at the northeasterly corner of the subject lands with site-specific zoning provisions. The portion of land proposed to contain this semi-detached dwelling is to be rezoned to the Residential 2, R2 zone, as the current institutional zone does not permit residential uses. An open house was held on February 16th, 2023, and 3 neighbors attended. No decision will be made this evening, but rather feedback from the open house and today's public meeting will be received, and staff will address these comments in a subsequent recommendation report at a later time. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. So there's one registered delegation for this item. Please note delegations may speak for a maximum of 5 minutes. Once we've received the delegation, committee will transition directly into the report and motion. Our delegation for this item is again Terrence Glover of Urban in Mind. Go ahead, Mr. Glover.
Thank you. As again, I'm going to be solo tonight, so bear with me as I go through this because Victoria was originally planned to present these. So again, similar to the other one, this is a semi-detached development. This is a concept of what we're proposing to put on the property. The property has it was originally, I think it was a church originally, and then it's an institutional youth center and that, daycare, et cetera, throughout the time. My client picked up the property a few years back, trying to do some back and forth with the institutional uses that are here. He wants to maintain an institutional use in this building, but the front of the property is underdeveloped, obviously. You can see, this is, again, the summertime picture. It's vacant in the front. It doesn't really match the block face in terms of residential neighborhood. It is an existing use, but it's not overly attractive, in my personal opinion. So we're looking at what we can do here. The property is designated residential, not institutional, it's designated residential. So the foundation should be residential in nature, but institutional is permitted through the zoning bylaw because of the institutional youth center that was previously here and there's continued to be here in the future. But in saying that, the building itself is underutilized. There's ability to have infill development here that matches the character and matches the setbacks, matches the type of streetscape that we want to see in this neighborhood. As you know, the street itself has been upgraded recently. It's a great opportunity to be able to finish that frontage, to fill the hole in the donut, I guess you'd say. So this is what we're proposing to do. There's going to be a small addition on the institutional use, as well as we're proposing the semi-attached in the front. We've done a block study to look at the setbacks, because this is a very unique streetscape neighborhood that basically all the houses were built different times, and that there's all different setbacks, as well as road widenings that occurred. So we did a study, and about 33% of the properties on this block face are at or less than the frontage we're asking for, front yard setback, I'm sorry. The other notable thing here is this will actually be a flag lot for the institutional use. It'll be a driveway, and then the property at the back will be the existing institutional use. The front of the property will be created for 2 semi-attached frontages. So basically, again, what I said is we're filling in the hole in the donut on the streetscape. We've also done an urban design brief on this to take a look at it. These are studies that the municipal staff will be considering and looking at. Again, I wouldn't say this is final. We're going back and forth with staff to figure out how to create the best product here that both meets the character as well as the intent of the infill intensification policies that we're faced with. Again, this is the concept of what we're looking at. Very in character, in my opinion, with the neighborhood and the eclectic type building structures and that, and the window fenestration, et cetera. They'll have garages as well as parking spaces for each unit. And this is a rendering of the addition on the front of the institutional building, more office type space and things of that nature. This is what it looked like from the street. So really, it looks like a continuation, if anything, and to the right here where the vacant spot, that would be the driveway to get to the back of the property. So it really fills in that street quite nicely, in my opinion. And, we just, different site-specific zoning. So going from the institutional, which doesn't currently permit residential, we're proposing site-specific that would allow semi-detached, and then some of the provisions that are required because of it. Ultimately, just so you know, ultimately we intend to sever these semis, so they won't be part of the institutional zone or the institutional property. They're going to be severed. Unfortunately, to sever property, you have to conform to the zoning first. So we're going through the zoning bylaw amendment first. We intend to come back with a severance to sever these lands once the zoning is set up. Thank you.
Turn that back on. Thank you, Mr. Glover. Are there any questions from committee? Councilor Minchma, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just a question on clarification on your last statement. So once the zoning is approved, so do you expect that the zoning will be conditional upon the property being severed?
Either it's chicken and egg, right? So unfortunately, in order to sever property or create a new lot, it has to be conforming to the zoning, either through minor variance or through zoning.
Mm-hmm.
So we can put a holding provision on the zoning if it's required to make sure it's severed, or just allow the zoning and we'll come back to sever it. Really, if you permit the zoning, there's no other. There's not really much more. It has to be severed essentially. But we're fine with whatever tool or mechanism the council feels that they need for this.
Okay, I guess that'll be something that staff will bring forward in their report. Thank you.
Councilor Mikluck.
Thank you, Chair Patrieva, through you to the presenter. Just looking at slide, at your conceptual drawing number 9, I'm seeing the addition there, and I'm wondering, is that addition, is that a residence? Is that proposed to be a residence?
I'll let the owners here, if you would. Mr. Chair, if the owner can speak to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Good evening. So currently, there is an addition there in that same sort of footprint, slightly different dimensions. When inspecting it, the foundation is not very well done. Some mold issues, not well constructed. So essentially, I want to replace the existing addition there. The main building itself was transported down the road, I think in the 50s, onto a new foundation. And the good use of the building is kind of compromised by the high elevation, like 5 feet off the ground. So I see the reason for the original addition to create a transition from ground level up into the elevated building. But unfortunately, the current addition is just in really poor condition. So that's just a concept drawing there, just an open floor plan, try and create more transitional space.
So through you, so that is not proposed to be?
So that's not an addition of a home there.
Okay,
No.
it's just for clarification, in my mind, it looks like one of the other units you're promoting.
Just for clarification as well, further to that, it's an institutional zone, so we would need to come in for some type of approval if that was the case.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Reimer. You got to come out, Councilor Mikluck. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Patrieva. Through you to the presenter, thank you, Terrence, for doubling up tonight. A question regarding the institutional part of this proposal. If this institutional property is not going to be kept in its current use, it'll change, has the option of having the entire property as residential use been examined? I have concern about institutional being surrounded on all sides by residential.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So I've suggested to the client that we develop this holistically for some type of institutional. There's no historic designation on this building or anything of that nature. The owner has suggested that they want to continue institutional type uses on here. They want to give back to the community, and they foresee institutional continuing on this site. It's right next to the parkland. But in the same sense, in order to keep things moving, he has to make some money, so he has to create some kind of income stream for this property. In the future, it's not contemplated now, but in the future, if this was to be redeveloped, it would be very simple redevelopment for some type of block townhouse or some type of other overall development. We are also considering the abutting property owner because we want to consider how the whole area would develop as opposed to just the property itself. So we've looked into scenarios where if something was going to happen in the future, could it also include the abutting property owner so that they're not left out in the cold? And there is scenarios where that could occur. But again, to answer your question more specifically, the intent is institutional at the back and residential in the front.
Thank you, Terrence. Thank you, Chair Patriva.
Thank you, Councillor Reimer. Okay, so there being no further registered delegates, are there any persons? Oh, Councillor Mikulik, okay, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry about that, Chair. Through you to the presenter. Also, I noticed Appendix B, is there plans for the basement of the unit to the, would it be the west? There's drawings for the floor plans. Is there plans for the unit on the western side facing Rittenhouse Road? Is there plans for that to be an accessory dwelling as well?
So if I understand your question, you're asking if one or more of the semis will also have accessory units?
Correct.
Okay, I'll get the owner to answer that in terms of his intent. I mean, just for clarification, the possibility is there, but I'll have the owner.
Yeah, so most homes I look to design, I try to include the possibility. It wouldn't be part of initial construction, but I very much see that more and more homes need the ease of allowing for an accessory apartment, given recent legislature and also a trend of more and more in-law suites or trying to make housing more affordable. So at construction, it's relatively reasonable to include a entrance to a basement from the outside, but doing after the fact, retrospectively, gets more expensive. So I try to include those in home designs if I can.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Point of clarification.
Go ahead, Ms. Glover, yeah.
I'd just like to, it hasn't been mentioned by the owner, but his parents and himself intend to live in these units. Obviously, that could change at any given point, but that's the intent currently.
Okay, thank you. So there being no further registered delegates on this, are there any persons present wishing to address council regarding zoning bylaw amendment application by 20 Valley Communities, Inc. for 3446 Rittenhouse Road? Please come forward and state your name, spelling your surname for the record. Okay. So I see there being no further delegations on this item. I have a motion moved by Councillor Rinchema that council receive and file for information the following delegation regarding the zoning bylaw amendment application by 20 Valley Communities, Inc. for 3446 Rittenhouse Road, Terrence Glover, Urban in Mind. I will now ask our deputy clerk to open the vote.
Thanks, Chair. That vote is now open for voting.
Okay.
And to close the vote. And that motion carries.
Okay, thank you very much. We will move directly into Report PD 05-23 regarding the zoning bylaw amendment, application by 20 Valley Communities, Inc. for 3446 Rittenhouse Road. Are there any questions from council to staff? Councillor Mikulik.
Thank you, Chair Patrieva, through you to staff. I'm just, when looking at these applications, this one in particular, this application these are 3-bedroom units or 3-bedroom structures. And I'm concerned about the amount of parking that we're allowing. Basically a garage and a single space. And should we be looking at these more as homes, calling them homes as opposed to units? Because when we talk units, it could be a 1-bedroom or it could be a 4-bedroom. And I'm just worried about the parking and the supply of it that is required by ourselves through our zoning bylaw review that we just recently passed last year. And as the proponents just mentioned, there could be the possibility for one of these units to be an accessory dwelling, which would require at least 3 parking spots for that unit. So do we look at that when we're considering these sorts of applications?
Mr. Bruder?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think this is a point that's been raised before. When we start talking about units, we talk about parking potential scenarios. I would note when we did go through that zoning review, Councillor, that you were referring to, we went through a pretty fulsome review of parking regulations, not just even in Niagara, but elsewhere, looking at communities with public transit, without public transit. When I look at this type of built form traditionally, and they're not seeking relief for this particular application, but 2 spaces per, we'll call them per semi-detached structure here is very standard. I do see your point about the potential for an accessory dwelling unit in the future, and I think that is something that can be looked at overall to see if parking space that's needed to supply that can be accommodated on site. But I think this is an issue that's going to be relatively widespread too as a result of Bill 23. Just generally, there's been a lot more flexibility opened up, as you know, for these types of secondary dwelling units. So, I mean, while I think you're bringing up a good point that we can at least look at with this application moving forward, probably something more, even more fulsomely that we're going to continue to look at as well. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm just concerned that, through you, I'm just concerned that, in existing neighborhoods that are already densely populated with both cars and people, with 3-bedroom sorts of units or homes, parking is already a premium, and that, we're, by approving this at the onset, we're basically saying that's okay. That's why I bring this up. Another question, if I may, with regards to this property, on the institutional zoning of it, currently it's zoned institutional. Do we know the square footage of that institutionally zoned structure, what the parking requirements are currently of it? And is it conforming in that regard currently?
Ms. Martin, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, I can't speak to the current square footage of the existing structure, but I can confirm that parking for the building is calculated as 1 space per 30 square meters. So they would require 16 spaces, 1 accessible space for a total of 17 spaces, which they meet with this application.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Renchema.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question through the staff, clarification on how the process will go, assuming the zoning is approved. How will we ensure that the property is eventually severed? Will that be through a holding, or what's the intent there?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, it is staff's intention to recommend a holding provision for the zoning amendment, have the applicant come in then for subsequent consent applications, and once that's completed, to come back to remove the holding.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So there being no further questions, I have a motion moved by Councillor Reimer to that council receive and file for information report PD 05-23 regarding a zoning bylaw amendment application by Urban and Mine on behalf of 20 Valley Communities, Inc., and that a recommendation report be prepared once all comments have been received and identified, and any identified issues have been addressed. I will now ask our deputy clerk to open the vote.
Thanks, Chair. That vote's now open. And I'll close the vote. And that motion carries. Thank you,
Okay.
Chair.
Thank you very much, Devan. We have now concluded tonight's statutory public meetings, and we will now continue to the consent agenda. So we have no consent items tonight. We're now at the Planning and Economic Development portion of tonight's agenda. Councillor Reimer has declared an interest with this, so we have one registered delegation for the Planning and Economic Development agenda. Please note that delegations have 5 minutes to speak. Our delegation this evening is Mr. John Arians of Arcadis IBI Group and Michael Reisman of Lifetime Developments regarding item 7.2.1, official plan and zoning bylaw amendment application by IBI Group for 3953 Jordan Road, PD 04-23. Mr. Arians, please go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of council. It's always a pleasure to be in the town of Lincoln on another exciting development project. I'm here on behalf of Pearl Morissette, one of Canada's top 10 restaurants situated here in the town of Lincoln. And we have an application which will allow us to expand their dining and restaurant facility and at the same time provide accommodations for some of their patrons who would use this facility. Let me start off by thanking staff for the support they've expressed during this process. We've worked closely with Matt and Allison on this project, and we have a favorable staff report for you to consider. I do have a PowerPoint presentation that I'd like to share with you, and basically I'll do a bit of a project overview, and I'll zero in on key items of discussion that were raised both at the public meeting and at the open house that we held on this project. So the subject plans are 2 parcels. The southerly parcel contains primarily the winery and the vineyards and restaurant. The northerly parcel is vacant and has the peach orchard. Both parcels will be merged, and together they will be just over 27.3 hectares in area. We have an estate winery with, as I said, one of Canada's top 10 restaurants, and the peach orchard is to the north. The development includes a new dining pavilion, which basically will occupy a similar location as council has previously approved for a seasonal dining pavilion. It's basically in the same general area next door to the existing restaurant. It will have an outdoor patio and a seasonal dining tent, but it will now be a permanent feature on the property as opposed to having to come back and ask you for permissions year after year. Then in addition, in the upper left-hand corner, you see the accommodation suites that are proposed. There are 2 buildings, each containing 9 suites. Those suites have been specifically designed to provide panoramic views of the orchard, and the whole idea is to emerge the residents or the users of these suites into the heart of an orchard, into the heart of tender fruit growing that Lincoln is famous for. We have included 1 parking spot per suite, and there's an associated new driveway and a pathway to connect them to the restaurant and winery. So during the public open house, some of the key items that were raised by members of the public is the impact on the peach orchard and whether or not the peach orchard will be retained. And what we've done in this instance is part of the concern was the views from Jordan Road. So we've actually moved the accommodation suites further to the interior of the project. It creates more of a buffer from the road. It's not going to be as visually prominent as the original concept. And it more or less, as I said, the whole intent is to immerse these guests into that agricultural experience. Originally, we had a crescent-shaped driveway with 2 entrances onto Jordan Road. And as a result, we actually had a larger footprint. By eliminating one of the driveways, we've reduced that footprint, the whole intent being to preserve as much agricultural land as possible. We've also reduced some of the landscape components, and again, the driveway and the peach orchards are cheek to jowl. They're right there, they're right next to each other, as opposed to having that manicured landscaping type of component. We're also using an existing tractor path as a pedestrian pathway to connect to the winery, rather than creating a new path. Again, the new path would have taken up more agricultural land, so the whole idea was to diminish the amount of agricultural land that would be affected. We've also had some significant discussions with the farmer of the peach orchard, and he has confirmed that the accommodation suites will have almost no impact on his ability to continue farming. Farming, of course, will take precedence, and when there is a spraying operation required, either for the trees or to keep the weeds down, there will be no accommodations within the facility at that time. So it will be fully coordinated with the efforts of the farmer so as to keep agriculture as the main and predominant use. So from that standpoint, I think we've successfully addressed the key agricultural issues that were raised at our open house and our public meeting. The next issue that was raised was the proximity to some of the residential properties. And there is a residential property to the north and there is one to the south. So by moving the accommodation suites further into the interior, we've created more of a buffer. And at a very minimum, there will be 4 rows of peach trees, both to the north and to the south, as well as the buffer from Jordan Road. I can also point out that the distance from the property to the north to the closest accommodation suite is about 45 to 48 meters. I don't have the exact distance because I don't have a survey plan of that particular property. And it should be noted that they have their garage immediately to the south and the dwelling is to the north. So their garage will function as a buffer as well. Similarly to the property to the south, that distance is 60 meters and there is an intervening shed between the peach orchard and their dwelling, so that shed will provide a degree of protection. So we've basically moved the accommodation suites farther away from the neighboring residents, and we've built in buffers and maintaining the peach orchard as well. One of the renderings prepared by the project architect shows what is proposed. And as you can see, it's a very minimalistic, I think is the architectural term here. Very simple design, no large building presence whatsoever. The glass walls are facing the orchard, so every suite has this panoramic view. Again, we're trying to immerse these residents or these guests into agriculture, and you can see how the peach trees will provide that substantial buffer and visual screening, particularly, of course, when the trees are in their leaf conditions. The height of the building is only 3.5 meters. So from that standpoint, it's not going to be this massive building. It's not directly on the street. It's going to be barely visible from the street, which is, purely the approach that Pearl Morissette wishes to develop. Signage was a concern raised by several of the residents, and their complaint was the people who visited Pearl Morissette didn't know where the driveway was because there was no signage, and they would knock on their doors and turn around in their driveway. So there will be signage both for the existing winery restaurant complex and their main driveway and for the accommodation suites. So we do want people to find their way to these wonderful facilities without bothering any of the neighbors. So improved signage is an integral part. And the main thing that we worked on over the last year or so since we were before you with the statutory public meeting is this land coverage for on-farm diversification. Now, I just want to put this in perspective for you. We are dealing with the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture and Food, who has a publication which is called Guideline 851. And it's a guideline. It's used by municipalities when they consider on-farm diversification such as this. And in fact, when they talk about the amount of land that on-farm diversified uses, or OFDs, can occupy, the ministry recommends that municipalities consider a cap of 2%. So it's a recommendation within a guideline. Surely that provides you with enough flexibility. When we calculate the lot coverage of all of the on-farm diversified uses on this property, we are at 2.36%. Just a minor exceedance of that guideline recommendation. And I think you have the flexibility to accommodate that given the type of operation that's here. And as I said, we've bent over backwards to reduce the driveways, the walkways, the landscaping, save as many trees as possible. Unfortunately, there's nothing we can do to reduce the septic system. That needs to be expanded. And that, of course, has to count for the on-farm diversification. So there really are no impacts on neighboring farms. There are no impacts on the peach orchard. When we considered alternative locations, we actually looked at 5 different locations on this property, and we developed a scoring matrix, and we worked with staff. And the location that is being recommended today scored the highest. So when you look at this particular property, yeah, we could have put it down on 4th. We could have put it closer to the street. We could have put it over here. But this really was the best location from the 5 that were considered. So in conclusion, the town of Lincoln is known as a center of excellence for agriculture. The accommodation suites, the additional dining pavilion are on-farm diversified uses, which will help reinforce that image. It supports the economic viability of your agricultural area. It provides new tourism opportunities. And without sounding facetious, on days like this, I wish we had accommodations close by so I don't have to drive home to Kitchener. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Arians. I got a couple, I got a bunk bed at home if worse comes to worse, so.
I may take you up on that, sir.
You and Mike can, fight over who gets the bottom, so. Any questions from, to our delegation? Councillor Michalak, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Patrieva, through you to the presenter. My apologies for laughing. It's we have a comical chair.
Accommodating chair. Yes. Go ahead.
That too.
Yeah.
Question I have with regards to the suites themselves, the accommodations themselves. I'm not sure if the proponent himself is here or herself is here.
Mike.
But from what I can see, is there anyone that will be there 24 hours to monitor the guests? Let's say that there's a rowdy bunch. Let's say that there is a wild party going on. It's wine country. Some people may get carried away. What's the plan in terms of dealing with rowdy guests?
So there is supervision as part of the winery, the restaurant complex. So there will be people on staff. Whether they're there 24/7, I'm not sure, sir, but there will be a mechanism in place to deal with security issues and to ensure that guests properly maintained. And Mr. Reisman is here now, and he can add more to that.
I would first like to apologize for my tardiness. I actually drove from Toronto, and the weather was not too friendly to me. But I would like to thank everybody for taking a listen to our motion, and we're really excited at Pearl Morset. I work for Mr. Pearl himself, and one of the things about this winery that's important to him is that this is not a profit center for him. He hasn't made money on this winery in 16 years since he actually purchased the winery. He believes in Lincoln. He believes in the tourism that this could provide, and he ultimately wants to see this through. With regards to the question on the accommodations and staffing, there will be staffing 24 hours a day. The staff lounge, staff accommodations are on site as well, so there will be supervision. And one of the points that Mr. Pearl wanted me to make as part of this hearing was that the renderings that we see right now it's not going to be, we'll say, second-class architecture. It's probably one of the best architects in Canada. As you can see in the way that his restaurant has been so successful, it's one of the best restaurants in Canada. And his intent is to make this one of the primary destinations in the Niagara region, and we would like to work with staff as well as council on getting there.
Thank you. I have another question, if I may.
Go ahead.
I want to talk about the spraying. Spraying, I'm not a farmer. Typically, the spraying is one of those things that's not predictable. It depends on the wind, it depends on the conditions. This is what I'm believing and speaking to other farmers. What does the reservation process look like with an accommodation like this when most people are making reservations a month or 2 or 3 in advance? What does that look like? How would you cancel reservations if spraying is required, especially with the proximity of these suites and the orchards themselves?
I think the intent is, at first, safety is going to be the most important item as well. Like we don't want residents or visitors or tourists to come to these accommodations and be in an unsafe situation. What I can imagine to happen in the past is that we do have disclaimers as well as allowing them to book at other points in time throughout the summer or what's convenient to them to ensure that safety is not, their safety is not put at risk. I think that would be the intent.
Okay, and I think that's a great idea that is noted in the reservation process, that it's farming first. And, there could be that chance that, there's a required spray and some flexibility especially during those periods of time that spraying might be required. So those are the main concerns I have at this time.
And I think one of the items that we did speak with staff on was the spraying of the peach orchard and how that would be accommodated in, like schedules vary, weather changes, and we were committed to ensure that farming practices maintain priority on the site. And at the end of the day, that is the business. The business is farming, winery, and this is just a luxury that we're able to potentially have in working with you.
Okay, and I'd also like to acknowledge that one of the concerns I did have was the appearance of a roadside motel. And, it's nice to see those trees are fronting Jordan Road so that we don't lose that visual farming community feel when driving into Jordan Village or Lincoln itself. So I do appreciate that effort.
Agricultural, ambiance that Pearl Morissette wants to maintain and create, and that's why moving it indoors or to the interior was so important.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Minchima.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I apologize if this was in the report somewhere, but I'm wondering how the signage that's proposed to be, that's sort of the addition now to alleviate the concerns of the neighbors of people not being able to find the property. Is that going to be sort of part of the site plan process, or how are we going to feel comfortable that that's going to take place?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, it would be part of the site plan process. Obviously, Pearl Morissette would propose a sign, show its location, and include that in our site plan review process. So it's a regional road, so I don't know if Big Brother's involved in their permitting and their setbacks, but we'll deal with that as part of the site plan.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so I have a motion moved by Councilor Minchima. The council receive and file as information the delegation from Michael Reisman and John Arians regarding the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment application by IBI Group for 3953 Jordan Road, PD 04-23. I will now ask our deputy clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote's now open.
Okay.
And I'm going to close that vote. And that motion carries, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. So we are now considering, so we're going to go into the reports. We are now considering Report PD 04-23 regarding zoning bylaw amendment application by IBI Group for 3953 Jordan Road. Do members of council have any questions? Okay. Councilor Russell, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff, Mr. Arians had mentioned the 2.36 lot coverage, and that, again, it's a guiding principle from the province to stick to around 2%. I'm just wondering, again, with that thought process in mind, that it's a guiding principle, not necessarily a hard, fast cap, wondering what your thoughts are on what upper level of flexibility we should allow for that, either on this one or on future ones, just to get some clarification.
Go ahead, Mr. Bruder.
To you, Mr. Chair. Good question for sure, Councillor. I think a lot of it, when you talk about a hard and fast cap and applying that across the board, I think there's a variety of factors that can vary. And I think the whole point of this being a guideline is for staff to work with an applicant and have the opportunity to evaluate it based on a site-specific circumstance and what's before you for a specific property. In this case, there is a little bit of an overage. It's not the first time we've seen one. There was also an overage on Alborgo Winery up on Zimmerman Road. In this case, there's been a lot of concessions made. We utilized that guideline to actually work with the applicant to bring down the overall lot coverage on the on-farm diversified use considerably. And there's also the result here too that can't be overlooked, that as a result of all of this, as a result of this business model, there's going to be an amalgamation of farmland. And if you look at provincial policy as well, that's often seen as a positive. Larger farm parcels typically are not something we see a lot of below the escarpment. And a larger farm parcel generally, I'll use the word generally, usually contribute to an increased viability overall. So there's a lot of factors to consider in terms of an actual hard and fast cap. I mean, we try to stay as close to 2% as we can. In this case, you can see we're not even 0.5% over the guideline. And that was really, to be honest with you, the tool that staff leveraged when they negotiated with the applicant on this application. So I know it's kind of a long-winded answer, but I would hesitate to provide you with a hard cap that would apply to every single situation out there.
Okay. Thank you for that, Mr. Bruder, and through you, Mr. Chair. Again, just a comment. I didn't chime in earlier because I didn't have a question to the presenters, but again, I do see a lot of vast improvements from what we saw or we're seeing now compared to prior. It's just, again, I do have that concern. Again, it seems like it's only 0.36% above, but really it's 20%. But again, I think that a lot of changes have been made from the original design, which I think are very positive. So I guess we'll just take it as it's a case-by-case scenario and kind of go from there. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, and if it helps, Councillor, I mean, this goes back to, one of the first applications that we had with, oh, God, I'm drawing a blank right now, Lincoln Avenue. Nicolette Novak's property, Good Earth. So she had wanted to do on-farm accommodations when she first built the winery. And there was a rule in place that said 6 units. And Mr. Deanne can chime in on this too, because, and Mr. Kirkopoulos, when we were in China and Vietnam on the provincial trade mission, we actually got the premier to a table one night and said to her, you know what? We need a made in Lincoln solution. You can't tie people's hands. If the operator needs X number of units to make a buck and to make it profitable, then that's what it should be. It shouldn't be to 6. So now seeing Alborga and Promore Set come with these and some flexibility put in place, I think it goes a long way to maybe those conversations we had that night and the constant bringing it to the forefront when we go to AMO and we have those discussions. Mr. Deanne, Mr. Kirkopoulos, any comments on that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, thanks for the opportunity, and I think you're absolutely correct. I would also suggest that if it wasn't for planning and economic development, doing that advocacy with senior levels of government, we wouldn't be here. I'm often asked, how do we maintain the Greenbelt? How do we maintain things like a volunteer fire service? It's by making sure we work within the parameters we have. So the Greenbelt is a gift, it's a tool. We often hear members of council highlight that, but the value-added piece allows it to remain that tool, that gift, that opportunity for us. And so A lot of advocacy to get us here. We've had one come before us. This is a second one, and we're probably going to see a few more. They have to fit into the location. They have to be right for the location. But these are absolutely what we want in order to maintain the Greenbelt and to maintain some of the other unique opportunities we have in the community. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Mr. Deanne?
Thank you, Chair. And just to echo on what the CAO said, getting rural accommodations has been a labor of love between economic development and planning for a number of years. We've gone to the province, we've gone to the region, we've advocated for this. So I'm happy to see that this is before council this evening. This is going to support our tourism sector. We did have a tourism workshop just a couple weeks ago that really talked about the need for more accommodations to support value-add agriculture and tourism in Lincoln. And so I know this is going to be a good fit to support tourism and attracting more visitors to Lincoln to spend money for our local businesses. So thanks for allowing me the comment, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mikluck.
Thank you, Chair. Patrick, through you to staff. Speaking earlier, I love those trees. I love the fact that we're retaining those that orchard out front. What guarantee do we have that those trees will remain in perpetuity, or as long as these rooms are there? Like when I drive by farms, trees come, trees go, depending on the farm itself. What is allowing us to maintain those trees in perpetuity or for the length of time that these suites would be there?
Allison, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you. Great question. Staff do have the intention to recognize the existing planting area in the site plan agreement that will come out of the site plan approval process with the owner and applicant. I would also just like to note that in the letter from the tenant farmer, they did commit to continuing to farming that portion of land, and they did note that trees have been planted as recent as 4 years ago, and sometimes it can take up to 4 years to yield crops from trees. So there is a commitment to continue farming those trees, and we'll ensure they're protected through the site plan agreement.
I think that's fantastic to hear that that's being considered. Again, not being a farmer myself, I do drive by and see grape vines disappear and then replanted or not replanted. I see orchards disappear, be replanted or not. I just want to make sure that there's trees in front. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. There being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Murray that counts, or you know what, I'm going to change that to committee. So, and we'll note that going forward. So, that committee approve official plan amendment PL 0PA 202108183 and zoning bylaw amendment PL ZBA 202-10182 by IBI Group on behalf of the property owner 215-6274 Ontario Inc. for 3953 Jordan Road, subject to the following conditions. That an H holding provision be placed on the zoning of the lands, and that the H holding provision is not removed until the owner has entered into a site plan agreement with the town, including the agreement being registered on title. Council enact and pass official plan amendment X as attached as Appendix A of report PD 04-23 to amend the official plan policies for the lands to increase the maximum gross floor area of the agritourism uses and to permit short-term accommodations containing a total of 18 suites on the subject lands. Council enact and pass zoning bylaw amendment 2023 XX as attached as Appendix B of report PD 04-23 to amend the zoning regulations for the lands to increase the total floor area of on-farm diversified uses, increase the total floor area of retail hospitality and restaurant areas, increase lot coverage of on-farm diversified uses, and to permit short-term accommodations in the form of 2 detached structures containing 9 suites each for a total of 18 suites. Council deemed that zoning bylaw 2023-XX conforms to the official plan for the town of Lincoln, and council declare that they have considered all of the written and oral submissions and agrees with the planning report analysis and recommendations, and finds that, subject to the conditions of approval, this application meets the Planning Act criteria, is consistent with the provincial policy statement, and complies with the growth plan, the Niagara Region official plan, and the town official plan. I will now ask our deputy clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now open. And I'll close the vote. And that carries, Chair.
Thank you very much, Devan. We are now considering Report PD-09-23 regarding updates to Bill 109 implementation. I will now ask our Director of Planning and Development, Mr. Bruder, to speak to the report. Okay, you got it.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to provide this update, information update to committee and council. Really, the intent here is similar to what we did recently with Bill 23. I just wanted to bring everyone up to speed on some of the work that staff has done, some of the work around the expedited timelines that come along with Bill 109 and the associated refund of planning applications if we don't meet those timelines. I won't go over those because they're noted in the report, but what I did want to inform committee and council about is we have been talking both, among municipalities in Niagara Region as well as with some members of the development/consultant group that do business frequently in Niagara Region to really work together collaboratively as much as we can to bring a new kind of take on the overall planning application process. And I can tell you, there's definitely been some things identified that we need to do just to meet those timelines, especially when you look at things like site plan approval, now required to undertake that in 60 days. That is significantly shorter than what most site plans take, let alone complex ones that can take upwards of 5 or 6 or more months. So really, some of the key themes that we've been talking about internally and with other municipalities, we talked first of all about beefing up our pre-consultation process a little bit. We typically go through a pre-consultation process where there isn't a whole lot of submission requirements to undertake that meeting. We all get around a round table, staff from various departments, any other interested agencies, and we provide high-level comments and try to scope out what the deliverables are for a particular development concept, identifying high-level constraints, issues we see, things like that. But moving forward, once the clock starts ticking on these development applications, we're really constrained in terms of timing. So we're going to have to look at requiring a little bit more information up front. We're going to have to look at a more fulsome review process. We're going to have to look at things like looking at zoning compliance way in advance and issuing certificates so we know that item box is checked before we even get to the complete application stage. So a lot of it is really doing more information at the front, sending out public notices when we send out notification of a complete application rather than trying to schedule it after the fact. So a lot of expediting at the very beginning, a little bit resource heavy to start off. Some of the other things we've been talking about too is looking at, for things like site plans, which are delegated to staff for approval, we're going to need to conditionalize certain things. There are some aspects of site plan processes that just won't fit within those mandated timelines anymore. But if we provide conditional approval, kind of similar to what we do with draft plans of subdivision, yes, there's approval, but it's contingent on, conditions X, Y, and Z that we lay out. They would be included in the site plan agreement, and before any building permit could occur, those conditions would have to be met. So there is still some flexibility in how we work through these timelines. So that is something we're continuing to look at. Moving forward right now, as you're well aware, as we saw tonight, currently we have a two-stage process for bringing planning applications forward, zoning bylaw amendments, official plan amendment applications. That can be onerous from a timing perspective when you look at the time that we are allotted to process these applications moving forward. So we're looking at opportunities to revamp that a little bit, not to get rid of any public outreach or consultation, but just to manage that process a little bit better. We're looking at different ways to hold public meetings earlier in the process. Maybe it's not, a formal meeting like we had tonight. Maybe it's something similar to an open house. Requirements for statutory public meetings are more on, making sure that all concerns are properly documented. We have individuals coming up stating their name for the record. We would have to have staff available, obviously, to minute them. We would obviously invite all of council So none of that would change. But it's just the way in which we do so. We would have to try to schedule a little bit earlier in the process and not necessarily around when committee and council meets, just to try to move things forward quicker. And then we would proceed afterwards with a recommendation report. So I say this just to give you an idea. There are some changes that staff are going to be recommending. We're in the process of finalizing those now. We have a working group internally here among planning staff that have been talking these issues through. So next steps, you see in the report, there has been a commitment from the province to delay implementation of these refunds with planning applications. So there is a little bit of runway to try to make these changes. I know not a lot of other municipalities have made changes to their process yet either. Everybody is still grappling with this and grappling with Bill 23. So there's still opportunity to do so. So next steps now are for staff to bring some formal recommendations to you. I just wanted to bring you an update to let you know that some of these changes are forthcoming. These are some of the high-level things we're looking at. And just to give you an overall update. And one last thing before I open it up to any questions is, what we're really talking about with Bill 109 is these faster timelines in terms of planning application refunds, but the opportunity to appeal for non-decision for things like zoning bylaw amendments and official plan amendments, that's already there. So that's not really changing. It's now more to go along with these faster timeframes are now potential refunds. And I would also note that for site plans, there is no opportunity to appeal for a non-decision, but now they are also going to be subject to these potential refunds. So that's it, just a brief update, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to wait a minute because someone's going to jump in. But thank you very much, Mr. Bruder. And you know what? And I think one of the things, and your note on page 5 of 6 about the flexibility to hold the public meetings separate. And I think that's the biggest bone of contention we hear on these. We didn't know about this. So I think getting out in front of it sooner, might be a better thing. And you know what? This is one of the good, actually, consequences coming out of this, is that, we're maybe going to do things differently. The public might feel more engaged. So good on you for coming up with that. So, no questions from committee. There being no further discussion. Oh, Councillor Michalak, I gave you time to come in. I stalled last time. Next meeting, my friends, not going to happen. Go ahead.
Okay. Through you to Mr. Bruder, a concern I have with regards to timelines, and where are we protected as a municipality when it comes to developers being slow to come back with information to help speed up the process on our end to make sure we meet our guidelines? Where is the accountability on the part of the developer with that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's a great question, and one I had yourself. I believe what you're asking is if a developer takes time to get back to us with a resubmission, things like that.
If they drag their feet and
Sure.
just to take advantage of the penalty and the refund of fees.
I actually reached out to our legal team about this because I wanted to know, is there an opportunity for us to stop the clock in those situations when we're looking at processing applications? Can we do that? And the answer was there's really nothing binding. I know some municipalities have a waiver system where, there's a mutually agreed constraint in the process or something that would take longer to deal with. So, each party signs a waiver, good, and then there's an agree to pause those timelines. But according to our legal team, that's not binding. So again, the way I see some of these things moving forward, we're not going to have the same opportunity like we used to have or that we have now where we've got, 1, 2, 3, 4 resubmissions on an application. There will be time for us to review a submission and then maybe one more resubmission and that's it. So, I think there's a little bit more to come out of it. I think part of the reason perhaps that the province might be delaying implementation is because that's a point that's been raised to them as well. But the way I see it is, again, we're dealing with some of that issue through conditions. If they can't satisfy what we need them to satisfy in a resubmission, then we would have to condition that, meaning, they might get their conditional approval, but they're still going to have to go through whatever we need them to go through before they get their building permit. And as far as I know, that is something that's being widely discussed among other municipalities. I know in the past, things like site plans were often the result of conditions. We would probably go back to that. And then with zoning bylaw amendments and things like that, there is definitely the use of a holding provision that we can definitely use more frequently. And if you would have noted, when we did our review of the fees for all the applications, the cost for lifting a holding provision was increased. And part of that, part and parcel, was looking at, what are the effects of this, because we feel holding provisions are going to be used a whole lot more, which still ties them into fulfilling the conditions they need to fulfill. So long-winded answer, I think there's ways to deal with it, but it is something that's been on top of mind for us as well.
Okay, thank you for that answer. Just through you, just to follow up, so you stated that other municipalities, other planners in your area, this is on your radar, this is your concern for other municipalities as well. Should there be a motion put forward by a municipality to ensure that this is addressed when Bill 109 is finalized and implemented?
Through you, Mr. Chair, as I mentioned, I think there's, even no matter what, I think there's ways we can still deal with that ultimately. I mean, if council wanted to pass a motion, I think it would be fine. But at the end of the day, I think, staff still have some legwork to do to come up with solutions. I think we're going to provide something a little bit more concrete to you in terms of what we envision the changes to be and what they mean for the process moving forward. So I might, if I'm council, I might wait until that time to kind of decide if you want to go any further with any kind of motion. So there's more to come.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. So there being no further discussion, I have a motion moved by Councillor Michalak to receive report PD 09-23 regarding Bill 109, More Homes for Everyone Act 2022. I will now ask our Deputy Clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote's now open. And I'll close the vote. And that motion carries.
Thank you very much. There being no additional reports to consider for the Planning and Economic Development Committee agenda, we have now concluded that for the evening. We will now consider agenda item 8.1, motion to consider confidential items. Before I read the motion and we move into closed, I would like to explain what's going to happen for those watching online. We have a motion to move into closed session. The Deputy Clerk will be turning off the live webcast during the closed portion of the meeting. Once we've completed the closed portion of tonight's meeting, we'll resume with the live webcast and carry on with the public portion of the meeting, and we will read the motions in public session. So I have a motion moved by Councillor Renchima that under Section 239 of the Municipal Act, notice is hereby given that council adjourned to closed session in order to address item 8.1 as follows. Pursuant to Section 239(2)B, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. I will now ask our Deputy Clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now open. And I'll close that vote. And that motion carries, Chair.
Thank you very much, Devan. Our Deputy Clerk will now proceed with the technical requirements to move into closed session. So Devan, you'll confirm when we're ready? We are ready? Not yet. Oh, you are going to confirm when we're ready. Okay. me turn that back on. I have a motion moved by Councillor Russell that council resume an open session. I will now ask our deputy clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now ready to be voted on. It's open. And closing that vote, that carries. Thank you.
Okay, so I have a motion moved by Councillor Mikulik that council receive and file the confidential updates and that staff move forward as directed in closed session as it relates to item 8.1 pursuant to section 239 2B, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. I will now ask our deputy clerk to open the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now open. Thank you, and I'll close that vote. And that motion carries.
Thank you very much, Devan. Do we have any committee remarks? There being no further business, I call the meeting adjourned at 7:47. Thank you.